Hey everyone, just wanted to give you a quick heads up. The second Global Product Owner Summit is coming soon. You can get all the details at bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. That's bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. And it's all lowercase, all one word. Oh, and stick with us until the end of the episode to know the dates and the tracks that we have for you in this year's summit. But for now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode this week with Dave Smith. Hey, Dave. Welcome back.
Hey, Bosco. Nice to be here. Thanks.
So, Dave, Wednesday is, of course, Change Day and Change Leadership Day, as I like to call it. And we want to talk about a change process you were involved in and walk us through the steps, like, you know, how it started, how it went, and so on. And as you go through the steps of that change process, highlight for us the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Well, I'm glad you call it change leadership skills rather than change leader skills. I went on some leadership training many years back, and one phrase I remember was, there's no such thing as leaders, there's only leadership. Stop calling yourself a leader. It's all about the attitude, the mindset. So I learned from that, anybody can express leadership. They can inspire, they can help people. In terms of the change process, I worked to one volunteer group where we didn't have any version control system. So everyone was treading on each other's toes. There was about 4 or 5 coders being voluntary. Many of these were not professional coders. They were just pretty much learning from Stack Overflow and how to and Idiot's Guides books. They were grabbing code, they were making changes, they were uploading it. There was a whole host of anti-patterns in there. There was a whole, there was lack of sanitization, a whole series of errors. There were schoolboy errors, but look, they weren't professional coders. They were enthusiasts. And one of the problems was, because this was voluntary, because I'm not being paid to do it, they thought it didn't need to be a professional job. I argued it was the other way around. If you're devoting effort, if you're lending your time, then really we should try and make best use of the time. So I introduced a version control system, and I showed people how to use Tortoise SVN so they could actually check out some code and make changes.
By the way, highlight that because these days many people out there might not even know what that is, but SVN is a totally different version control system than what we have these days, like with Git and other similar. Bitbucket, I believe, is another one, and so on. So an important aspect is that there's some specific way to work with that type of version control system. I believe SVN was already advanced enough to do file-based locking instead of branch-based locking, something like that.
Yes, and that's perfectly the reason why we used it. So one person would check out a certain file, and when I looked at the list of files in Tortoise, I could see that these files had been checked out, so I couldn't touch them. Well, still, if I took a file out and I didn't check it out, when I tried to check it back in, it would say, no, it's already checked out. You've lost your changes. So it incentivized us to actually flag up what changes were being done. Now, something I omitted to mention was the coders actually took place over disparate time zones. So some were in UK, some were in Canada, some Germany, some over in the Far East. So we didn't all communicate with each other that well. But using this, we could actually see who would check things out and why. Now, one of the problems we did have with the system was that very few people knew how to use it. We had a volunteer-driven guide, but it wasn't very good. It was actually how to do something, not why should we do it. So I rewrote one, simply saying, look, if you want to make a change to X, Y, Z, this is what you do. You check it out, you make your changes, you check it back in. When you check it in, you leave a note there. Other people will read these. And that's when I came across one of the most irritating attitudes of programmers, where they're the first ones to complain with this lack of documentation, but they don't have time to document their own code. You know, it's just catch-22. Mate, you're actually making a rod for your own back here. So just by putting comments in to say what you changed and why you changed it actually shed some light on when we were debugging or trying to troubleshoot something not working. That was the first change control process I did. We also had a bit of a peer review. Now, because many of these were volunteer coders, they didn't like having their best enthusiastic efforts being put under a spotlight. So the first thing I did was actually say, we're going to look at mine. So they looked at mine and they started to pick huge holes in it. And I said, yeah, okay, it's a bit crap, it's a bit rubbish. What they didn't know is that I actually had a quick look at theirs, found some schoolboy errors and deliberately added all the errors into my code. So I held mine up as being a poster child for being terrible. So all the times they were saying, well, look, you've got an undeclared variable or this thing shouldn't work. The simple response was, well, what should it be? Tell me how I should fix it. What do I need to do? So they started fixing it. And then when it went to person B, person C, person D, they found the same errors there. Yeah, we've seen it in Dave's code. We know what to do. Let's move on. So these people then were a bit sheltered from the ire of other developers. They didn't feel put on the spot. And after a few weeks of this, it then became a bit of a joke of, are we going to have less errors than Dave? So it started to include, it started to up the quality of the code because people were learning from each other. They were learning not from my mistakes, but also people actively researching. But because I provided a target for them to all aim at, and there were no targets on their backs, they felt safe. And they also saw that I wasn't quite defensive about it. I wasn't taking offense at people laughing and pointing fingers. And I was just saying, yeah, it's crap. I don't know how to do this. How should I do it? So it was about building that safe environment. And that's really when I came across, if you need a psychologically safe environment, you need to step forwards. You need to be the person who picks up the hammer and smacks it on your own fingers and says, right, that hurt, don't do it again. Can you learn by my mistakes? You need to step up there and you need to take all of that embarrassment on board. I don't know if you've seen, there's a video on leadership where there's a group of people on a hill watching a band, and one guy gets up and he starts doing some really strange dance moves. And then another person joins them and another person joins them. And they say, look, part of leadership is you've got to stand up and you've got to be the embarrassment. You've got to put yourself out there and you've got to make it look right and normalize it for other people. And other people would join up and eventually the whole crowd would dance it. But they said they're only dancing because one person said, I'm going to do this no matter how embarrassing it is. And I thought, no, that's a valid point. Leadership sometimes is about you've got to take on the cost of risks. You've got to understand that you could be pillared for it, but you have the courage of standing up and doing it.
Absolutely. And one aspect of what you said that I want to highlight is that part of creating the openness for change is creating the safety for change. And actually, one would be able, I mean, I would argue that safety needs to come first, because if you're looking for openness, a lack of resistance, then it's too late already, because what we should have started was by creating this insight, this idea that it's a very easy change for all of you, right? Like, and you gave that example, which I think is a great illustration of what leadership is all about, that you displayed the errors you saw in others in your own code. Therefore, everybody could learn to identify the errors and talk about it openly at first, so that then when the next person would perhaps do the same error, it wouldn't be such a big issue anymore, because we've already taken our jokes out on Dave, so now it's an old joke. Let's not go there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite happy being the punching boy, or let's punch the bear first, and then we can move on to other people. Interestingly, you talk about the idea of something you mentioned just reminded me about change culture. Something I would teach in ITIL was about a change isn't just a change of product. There's also a change of process and a change of person. You need to understand change impact. And this idea of people fear change is wrong. It's about people fear unfamiliarity. Most failed changes have always occurred as a result of lack of stakeholder engagement. We don't think about the person point. So all the changes that have been fairly successful for me, I've always gone to people and said, these are the changes we're proposing. How do you feel about it? What are your concerns? What are your thoughts? So I get them on side with getting all of their alarms and fears out. And I won't say, well, that isn't going to happen. It's, no, you've got a valid point there. I didn't think about that. I try and encourage a welcoming aspect, invite them. Also, I ask them, well, if we're not going to do that, how could we do it? So the more involved they are, the more invested they are. I build buy-in that way. Now, I think a good change manager is somebody who, after meeting people, all the people are chomping at the bit and expecting this change to happen tomorrow because they're really looking forward to it. That's what a good change manager should do. I think it's a similar scenario in the Agile world. That a lot of agility is about collaboration, about communication, about working together, about getting ideas from more people. I saw that with good and bad change management years ago, how a project just foisted change onto people, and people didn't know it was coming. They were untrained for it. They didn't know how it changed their processes. They were left in the dark. They were neglected. You involve them, you get them to suggest things. You just won half the battle. And when somebody says, well, this may impact on this process I do, okay, how will it change and what will it do? And therefore, they're all prepared for when the change comes along. When it happens, suddenly they haven't pulled the rug out from under their feet. They're resilient to it. It's great. they're on board.
Absolutely. And that aspect of involving people, first early enough, of course, don't involve them after you've invested so much time that you don't want to change anything, but involving people first, and then also actively listening to their feedback and actively changing things from the plan that you had turns potential skeptics or resistance into advocates. I mean, I've seen that with several Agile adoption processes where the people who were the most vocal at first, that got to be heard and understood, and maybe there was some changes, or maybe there wasn't, but they were the most vocal at first. And then through the process, they eventually became the most fervorous adepts and advocates for the change, right? And that ability to listen specifically to resistance, right? Then that becomes a superpower for us as change agents. And I call this harnessing resistance, because that some of the things that you said, or some of the examples that you said, were about listening to them and changing the process to reflect their perspective. And that gives people validation. They feel heard, they feel understood, and that brings them along. And not only that, but now they are starting to commit to the change, right? Because they first resisted, they got heard, and they say, yeah, okay, now this makes sense because I've already put my investment into it.
That's an interesting point, because Tim McClure said the only thing an organization has to fear is when their most vociferous or the most passionate employees fall silent. And it is a case of the most fierce resistors are actually the most passionate people. You want to keep that passion, you just want to drive it in the right way. And let's not forget, the people who are quite passionate about it can see concerns, and they could also not just be the most advocates, but come up with great ideas. It's foolish to actually turn them down. And I think the more people you involve in the change, the more successful it's going to be, because you've got a great many minds all driving into the change, or seeing things that you don't spot. So it's always a good idea to get as many people involved where possible, harness the brain power of collective community.
Absolutely. And that's one of the principles of improvement. The more people look at something, the better it will be, because you get more feedback, more perspectives in. Thank you for sharing that, Dave. Great stories.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Hi there, Agile friends. Thank you for sticking around and listening to the details of the Product Owner Summit, this year's global summit dedicated to a critical Scrum role, the product owner role, of course. We'll have some amazing keynotes and 4 tracks filled with first-hand stories and experiences for product owners to learn more about that critical Scrum role. The summit will take place between April 23rd and 25th, so book your calendars. There will be loads of sessions for you to attend. One of the keynotes will be Dave West, the product owner and CEO at Scrum.org, one of the largest Scrum organizations in the world. If you want to know more, check out the details at bit.ly/product owner 2024. That's all one word, all lowercase, bit.ly/product owner 2024. We will also have 4 tracks. The 4 tracks will cover cross-functional product ownership. That's track 1. As Pixar's Ratatouille said, not every idea can be a great idea, but a great idea can come from anywhere. And this quote emphasizes the importance of a product owner being open to all ideas, regardless of the source, and also challenges us to focus on getting good ideas from everywhere and involving the whole team in the product owner role and responsibilities. The second track is Designing Products for Growth, where we explore how to craft products ready for scalable growth, merging practical strategies with innovation. The idea here is to learn to design products for growth, whether it is sales or customer acquisition. The third track is Know Your Users, user-centric approaches for Agile development. In this track, we learn to master user-centric techniques in Agile development, to deeply understand customer needs and transform insights into meaningful UX designs that focus on engagement and satisfaction. This is a track ideal for innovation-focused Agile teams. And the fourth track, one of the most exciting tracks in my opinion, is product development with AI, ideas for product owners. Not only do we discuss about using AI in the products, but also AI for product owners to learn to make a bigger impact with the help of the AI tools that we already have. The Product Owner Summit will also present to you great opportunities to network with your peers. So get your ticket and join our Slack. You can get the ticket and join the Slack at bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. As always, we have free tickets and also the paid tickets that help to support this podcast. So check them out at bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. That's all lowercase, all one word, Product Owner 2024. I'll see you in the summit floor.